My name is Valerie Ann Mitchell, 36 years old, and last Sunday everything ended at the dinner table. Dad slid the house keys across to my younger brother and announced, "Your brother deserves the house. It's fully paid off, title already transferred." Mom beamed and slid a little plastic gift my way, a $5 house-shaped keychain price tag still dangling. My brother smirked. "Guess some people just aren't house material, huh, Val?" I stayed silent. I took out my phone, opened the family trust account I've controlled alone for 12 years and transferred every single cent. $1,870,000, gone in 42 seconds. Dad's fork froze midair. Mom's smile died. My brother looked like he'd been punched in the gut. I stood up, dropped my house key on the table, and walked out without a word. Want to know how I legally took everything they thought was theirs and why I disappeared for good? Stay till the very end. If you're not subscribed yet, hit that red button right now and turn on notifications, because this story only gets crazier from here. Let's dive in. I left the house at 10 that night, drove straight to Cleveland Hopkins, and booked the last red-eye with a connection through Denver. The plane touched down in Phoenix just after 4 in the morning. My best friend Jenna Ortiz was already waiting at arrival's arms open before I even cleared baggage claim. She didn't ask questions on the ride to her place. She just handed me a coffee and let the silence do the rest. That night, for the first time in 36 years, every memory I had spent a lifetime burying came rushing back with perfect clarity. When we turned 10, my younger brother Blake Alexander Mitchell, 3 years behind me, got a backyard party with a rented bouncy castle, a professional magician, and a 3-tier cake that cost more than my dad made in a week. My birthday the same summer was a single grocery store sheet cake and 2 classmates who left early because their parents had better plans. Dad said Blake needed the confidence boost. I was already too serious. At 18, I worked 2 jobs to put myself through undergrad, while Blake got full tuition plus a monthly allowance wired straight from my parents. Mom told anyone who asked that Blake was finding his passion in graphic design. My accounting degree was apparently something I could handle on my own. I graduated with my MBA on a Friday night. The ceremony seats reserved for family stayed empty because Blake had a club soccer tournament in Columbus. Dad sent a text the next day. "Proud of you, kid. We'll celebrate when things calm down." They never did. I started at a mid-size firm in Cleveland, took every certification exam I could, and by 24, I was pulling 6-figure bonuses. That same year, Dad sat me down with a stack of papers and asked me to set up a revocable family trust so they could avoid estate taxes down the road. I became the sole trustee and the only named beneficiary after their passing. They signed without reading past the first page, told me to handle the investments however I wanted, and went right back to treating the growing balance like their personal rainy day fund. Every dollar of principal and every cent of profit legally belonged to me from day one. Over 12 years of disciplined reinvesting turned my bonuses into $1,870,000, and they never once noticed the statement stopped coming to the house. Blake blew through cars, trips, and failed business ideas while I lived in the same modest apartment, drove a paid-off sedan, and quietly compounded the account. Mom bragged to her friends that Dad was such a smart investor, and Blake believed the money was waiting for him whenever he needed a boost. By the time I walked out that Sunday night, I had already planned every step. The trust was mine alone. The amendments making it irrevocable had been filed and mailed to the house years earlier. They ended up in the trash with the junk mail, and the transfer I executed at the dinner table was nothing more than moving my own money from one pocket to another. Jenna pulled into her guest parking spot, killed the engine, and finally spoke. "You're safe here. Whatever you need, I've got you." I leaned my head against the cool window and watched the first hint of desert sunrise creep over the mountains. For the first time in my life, the weight on my chest felt a little lighter, like I had finally stopped carrying people who never once offered to carry me. 2 weeks later, inside Jenna's spare bedroom in Phoenix, my phone never stopped lighting up. Mom left voicemails that started calm and ended in tears, saying her blood pressure had spiked so high the doctor threatened to admit her if she didn't calm down. Dad's messages were colder, promising that their attorney was already drafting papers for fraud and breach of fiduciary duty. Blake sent paragraph after paragraph first, begging, then cursing, then begging again. One stood out. I put 20 grand down on a condo last month, thinking the trust would cover closing costs. Return the money, or I lose everything. I read them all, once felt absolutely nothing, and muted every Ohio number I recognized. Then the official letter arrived. Thick cream envelope, return address from a downtown Cleveland law firm. Inside was a formal notice of intent to sue for conversion of trust assets, undue influence, and forgery of the 2019 amendment that removed my parents as beneficiaries. They claimed the signature page looked suspicious and demanded I return every dollar within 10 days or face court. I scanned the document attached to the original revocable trust, the 2019 amendment notarized in front of 2 witnesses, the certified mail receipts proving it had been delivered to the house, and the signed acknowledgement card that Dad himself had tossed on the kitchen counter years ago. I wrote a short cover letter to their attorney pointing out that the sole trustee had absolute discretion and that the amendment was recorded with the county before Blake even graduated college. I hit send and blocked the firm's number too. That same week, I started seeing Dr. Elena Carter, a therapist Jenna had used after her divorce. The office was a quiet suite in Scottsdale with soft lighting and no clock on the wall. First session, she asked why I was there. I sat on the couch, stared at my hands, and heard myself say the sentence I had never allowed out loud. I was never the daughter. I was the backup plan, the one who was supposed to be grateful for scraps so Blake could have the whole meal. Dr. Carter didn't flinch. She just nodded and asked what it felt like to finally speak that truth. I told her it felt like breathing after holding my breath for 36 years. She asked if I was angry. I thought about it and realized anger would have been easier. What I felt was hollow, like someone had scooped everything out and left a shell that still walked and talked and managed money for people who never saw me. We spent the rest of the hour mapping the pattern, every milestone I hit alone, every time I paid my own way, every time I was told to wait my turn, because Blake needed it more. By the end, my face was wet, and I hadn't even noticed the tears starting. Dr. Carter handed me tissues and said the healthiest thing I could do right now was keep the boundary exactly where I had placed it. Outside the building, the desert heat hit me like a wall, but for once, it felt clean. I drove back to Jenna's with the windows down and the radio off, letting the wind strip away the last of Cleveland still clinging to my skin. That night, I changed every password, closed the old trust dashboard, and opened new accounts under only my name. When Jenna got home from work, I was sitting on the balcony drinking iced tea and watching the first time in weeks. I didn't jump every time the phone buzzed. 2 months later, things started moving faster than I ever expected. A headhunter I had quietly contacted weeks earlier called with an offer from a private wealth management firm based in Scottsdale. The title was Senior Portfolio Manager, base salary $280,000, plus quarterly performance bonuses that would easily push total compensation more than 70% above what I had earned in Cleveland. The managing partner liked my 12-year track record of consistent mid-teens returns, and the fact that I had managed a high 7-figure book with almost no drawdowns. I accepted on the spot, gave notice to my old firm remotely, and started the following Monday. With the first new paycheck still weeks away, I decided to stop renting someone else's guest room. I found a 2-bedroom condo in North Scottsdale, modern build, mountain views, and paid cash from the trust balance. The closing took 9 days because there was no loan to underwrite. Walking through the empty rooms with the keys actually in my hand felt surreal, like I had stepped into a life that belonged to a stranger who finally deserved good things. I was hanging the last picture in the living room when my phone buzzed with a text from a number I hadn't saved in years. My cousin Tyler Brooks, who works as a tax accountant for the county back in Ohio, sent 3 photos without any greeting. The first was a scanned notice of default, taped to the front door of the house I grew up in, dated 12 days earlier, and stamped in red. The second showed Blake's Venmo history, dozens of 4- and 5-figure transfers to offshore sports books that added up to over $180,000 lost in a single month. The third was a screenshot of Blake begging a loan shark on Telegram for another extension. Tyler followed the pictures with a short message. "They're telling everyone you stole from them. Thought you should see what's really happening." I stared at the default notice until the screen went dark. Part of me waited for guilt that never arrived. Instead, there was only a quiet recognition that the consequences they had spent decades delaying were finally knocking on their door. I replied with a simple thank you and told Tyler I appreciated the heads up. He answered instantly that the family group chat had turned into a war zone, with Mom posting Bible verses about forgiveness and Dad threatening to drive to Arizona himself if I didn't wire money by the end of the week. I left the chat on mute and turned the phone face down. That evening, I met Jenna for celebratory margaritas at a rooftop bar overlooking the city lights. She raised her glass and grinned when I told her about the condo and the new job. We talked about everything except Ohio until the sun dropped behind the mountains and the desert air finally cooled. Driving home in my own car to my own place, windows down and music loud, I realized I hadn't checked my phone for missed calls in hours. The silence felt like freedom. 6 months later, I was stepping out of my building on a quiet Saturday morning when Blake appeared from behind a palm tree near the entrance. He looked nothing like the brother who once smirked across the dinner table. His shirt hung loose on a frame that had dropped at least 30 pounds, dark circles carved deep under his eyes, and his hands shook as he clutched a crumpled manila envelope. Before I could react, he dropped to his knees on the hot concrete and started pleading loud enough for the valet to hear. "I need $200,000 today or they're coming for me. The people I owe don't send letters, Valerie, please. You're the only one who can fix this." Security was already moving toward us. I raised a hand to slow them and looked down at the brother who used to get everything first. The desert sun beat down on both of us, but I felt cold. I crouched just enough to meet his eyes. "Do you remember telling me some people just aren't house material?" I kept my voice low, so only he heard the next part. "Starting in 2017, I moved every dollar of profit into a new irrevocable trust that only carries my name. My attorney drafted it, filed it, and mailed notice to the house in 2019. You all threw it away with the pizza coupons." Blake's mouth opened and closed like he couldn't find air. I stood back up as the guard reached us. "I'm not giving you a cent. Not today. Not ever." He scrambled to his feet, face twisting. "You're destroying the family." "No," I said, stepping aside so security could take his arm. "The family destroyed itself the day it decided I wasn't worth the same chances you got." They escorted him to the gate while he shouted my name over and over, voice cracking on the last syllable when the automatic barrier closed between us. I watched his rental car peel out of the guest lot and disappear onto the main road, then walked back inside without looking behind me. Later that afternoon, I sat on my balcony with a glass of water and opened the envelope he had tried to shove at me. Inside were collection notices, final demands from 3 different sports books, and a printout of a debt assignment to a recovery firm in Las Vegas. The total came to $212,000 plus daily interest. At the bottom, Blake had scrawled, "I'm sorry," in shaky handwriting. I took photos of every page, saved them in a folder labeled evidence, and deleted his new number before he could text again. When Jenna came over for dinner that night, I told her what happened. She listened without interrupting, then poured us both wine and said the only thing that mattered, you didn't cause his mess, and you don't have to clean it up. The next week, I increased the building's guest policy and added Blake's name to the do not admit list. Life moved forward. Work stayed strong, the condo finally felt like home, and the constant buzz in my chest from waiting for the next crisis slowly faded to silence. 10 months later, my life in Phoenix looked nothing like the one I left behind. The firm announced my promotion to partner at the quarterly all-hands meeting. The compensation package came in writing the same afternoon base salary, $350,000 guaranteed bonus, and carried interest that pushed expected total earnings north of $550,000 a year. Colleagues I respected clapped me on the back. The managing partner handed me a crystal plaque, and for the first time in my career, someone said out loud that I had earned every bit of it through results, not favors. That same week, I started dating Dylan Hayes, a fellow partner who runs the real estate credit desk. We had worked on deals together for months, late nights, poring over models and term sheets, trading sarcastic comments over cold coffee. One Thursday, he asked if I wanted to grab dinner somewhere that didn't have fluorescent lighting. We closed the restaurant down talking about everything except work, and when he walked me to my car, he kissed me under the parking lot lights like it was the most natural thing in the world. Nothing about it felt complicated or rushed. It just felt right. While my world kept expanding, the old one was shrinking fast. Tyler sent a message one quiet Sunday morning with no text, just 4 photos. The first showed the foreclosure auction sign hammered into the front lawn of the house on a gray Ohio morning, red lettering screaming "Final Sale." The second was the county sheriff's notice taped to the door giving my parents 30 days to vacate. The third captured Mom and Dad loading battered boxes into a rented U-Haul, faces blank with exhaustion. The fourth was a grainy shot of Blake in a neon DoorDash jacket leaning against his dented Civic at 3 a.m, phone light, illuminating the stack of delivery bags in the passenger seat. Tyler added one line, "They lost the house last week. Blake works both apps full-time now, just to cover rent on a studio." I sat on my balcony staring at the images until the screen timed out. The desert stretched gold and endless in front of me, while the past finally collapsed behind me. I felt no triumph, no vindication, only the quiet certainty that every choice I made had been the right one. Dylan came over that evening with takeout from my favorite taco place. I showed him the pictures without explanation. He studied them for a long moment, set the phone down, and pulled me close. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded against his shoulder and realized I actually was. The people in those photos had become strangers who happened to share my last name, and the way distant cousins you only see at funerals feel familiar yet foreign. A few weeks later, Tyler called for the first time since I left Ohio. He spoke fast, voice low, like he was afraid someone would overhear. Mom's blood pressure had landed her in the hospital twice in a month. Dad sold his truck to cover medical bills. Blake moved into the 1-bedroom apartment with them because he couldn't make rent alone. Tyler said the family kept waiting for me to swoop in and save the day, still convinced the money was rightfully theirs. I listened without interrupting, then told him, "Thank you for the update," and that I wished them well, but I would not be sending anything. He sighed like he had expected the answer and hung up. That night, Dylan and I cooked dinner together in my kitchen, music low, wine breathing on the counter. He asked if I ever missed them. I thought about it while chopping vegetables, and realized the honest answer was no. I missed the idea of a family, sometimes the warmth I saw in other people's homes, but I didn't miss the constant measuring, the endless comparison, the quiet message that I was never quite enough. Here in this bright condo with a man who looked at me like I was already whole, I finally understood what enough felt like. Before bed, I opened the folder on my laptop that held every trust document, every bank statement, every piece of evidence I had collected over the years. I dragged the entire thing to the trash and emptied it without hesitation. There was nothing left to prove, and no one left to prove it to. 18 months after I left Cleveland, I flew back to Ohio one last time for Tyler's wedding in Columbus. I had warned him weeks earlier that I would bring documents and that I intended to speak if anyone tried to corner me. He understood, hugged me tight at the rehearsal dinner, and promised the day belonged to him and his bride. Everything else could wait until after the ceremony. The reception was held in a restored warehouse, downtown string lights, and long wooden tables, nearly 80 relatives laughing over old stories. I stood near the bar in a simple black dress sipping sparkling water when Mom spotted me across the room. Her face crumpled the way it used to when I was 10 and came home with straight A's she never noticed. Dad followed her gaze, set his drink down, and started toward me, with Blake trailing 2 steps behind like a shadow. Mom reached me first, clutching my wrist. "You have to help us now. We're in a 1-bedroom apartment, Valerie. Your father's truck is gone. Blake can barely keep the lights on. This has gone far enough." Dad's voice was low and shaking. "Come home. Fix this. We're family." Blake just stared at the floor, hands jammed in his pockets. I pulled my arm free, reached into the leather folio at my side, and laid a thick manila envelope on the nearest table. The chatter around us died as people turned to watch. I opened it slowly and took out the first stack. This is the 2019 amendment to the revocable trust, notarized and recorded, removing both of you as beneficiaries because the money was never yours to begin with. I held up the signature page so the nearest cousins could see Dad's own handwriting. "You received certified copies. You threw them away." I pulled out the next set, bank statements from 2012 through 2022. These are wire transfers from Dad's personal account to Blake's $300,000 over 10 years, everyone labeled loan or gift. Money that came from the same trust bonuses I earned while you told me to pay my own way through school. Gasps rippled across the room. Phones came out. Someone killed the music. I kept going, voice steady. Every cent I moved was legally mine the day the trust was created. Every amendment was filed and mailed. Every profit belonged to the sole trustee, me. I looked straight at Mom, then Dad, then Blake. You spent 36 years teaching one child she was worth nothing. This is what happens when that child finally believes she's worth everything. Mom's swayed eyes rolling back and crumpled to the floor. 2 aunts rushed to her side. Dad stood frozen, face ash-gray, mouth working soundlessly. Blake bolted, shoving past tables and out the side door into the night. No one followed him. I gathered the copies, placed them back in the envelope, and set it in the center of the table like evidence at a trial. Then I walked out the same door Blake had used, heels clicking on the concrete, and never once looked back. On the red-eye home, I blocked every remaining Ohio number, deleted the family group chats, and removed myself from every email chain. When the plane touched down in Phoenix the next morning, the past finally stayed on the ground in Columbus. 3 months later, I closed on a penthouse in downtown Scottsdale, floor-to-ceiling windows framing the entire valley. That first evening, I stood on the balcony as the desert sunset turned the sky blood red and gold. Dylan came up behind me, arms around my waist, chin resting on my shoulder. I spoke the words into the warm wind, quiet but certain. Blood doesn't get a free pass to ruin your life. Sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is close the door and never look back. Behind us, the city lights blinked on one by one, bright and new and entirely mine. And that's the end of the story. Mom and Dad now live in subsidized senior housing. Blake still delivers food until 3 in the morning and sleeps in his car when rent is short. They lost everything they spent decades believing was guaranteed because they never once believed I was worth investing in. The lesson is simple: favoritism isn't love. It's theft disguised as family tradition. When you teach one child they don't matter, don't be surprised when they stop acting like they do. If you made it to the end, thank you truly for listening to every word. Drop a comment and tell me, have you ever had to close a door forever to protect your peace? I read every single one. Like, subscribe if this hit home, and I'll see you in the next story.